Perhaps only parents are ready to go to the end to save their child's life. Today's story is another confirmation of this truth. This story happened in the family of George Pickering from the American state of Texas. The son of a 59-year-old man was in serious condition in a hospital in the city of Tomball, located near Houston. The young guy suffered several strokes, which led to severe consequences for the body. Georgie's son fell into a coma, and soon the doctors recorded that the patient's brain stopped working. The doctors decided to disconnect the guy from the life support device because there was nothing more they could do for him. That's just the father did not agree with this. When George found out that his son wanted to be disconnected from the life support machine, which meant just the end for the guy, he was just crushed. The initial shock was replaced by anger and rejection of what was happening. The man just couldn't believe that his son was going to die soon. Pickering began begging doctors to wait for the fatal shutdown. George was hoping for a miracle, but the doctors were adamant. George couldn't accept what was happening. The man even had thoughts of suicide, but he decided not to give up so easily. What can be done in such a situation? Pickering thought that any methods were good, as long as his son remained alive. And the man went to extreme measures. Pickering took the gun and resolutely headed to the hospital. At the medical facility, he took out a weapon and began threatening the staff. He warned that no one would dare to kill his son without paying for it with his life. The 9mm pistol, which was in the hands of a desperate parent, clearly hinted that these were not just threats. George went to the intensive care unit to see his son. He ordered the doctors to leave the room to be alone with a loved one. George is in the ward, constantly talking to the dying man. The father begged his son not to leave him, to return to life. Soon a police squad arrived at the scene. George managed to be alone with his son, keeping the medical staff away from him for about 4 hours. Despite the hopelessness of the situation, a real miracle happened. George prayed incessantly, holding his son's hand. At the same time, Pickering did not forget to rebuff the police, forbidding them to enter the ward. George asked his son to give a sign. It was very important. My father begged me to squeeze his hand, and the guy who was declared hopeless by the medical board gave a sign to his father. He squeezed Georgie's hand, and several times. The son made it clear that he wants and is ready to live. Incredibly, on the same day the guy came out of the coma, he was even able to say a few words. The first thing the patient said was a declaration of love for his parents. So the patient, who had already been written off, remained alive. This happened thanks to the fearlessness of his father, who was not ready to give up just like that. On the moral side, the man was right, but what does the law say about what happened? How did this story end for George? The confrontation with the police lasted a long 4 hours. As a result, George was charged with aggravated assault. Recall that the father had a gun with which he threatened the staff. As a result, the police were able to persuade the man to surrender, but he did it only when he was convinced that his son had given a sign. It should be noted that during the confrontation with the police, the man became ill. Later, he received the necessary medical assistance. As a result, George was sent to jail. But the sentence was commuted as a result. The man was released shortly after the incident. As George said, he knew that his son was not a vegetable. The man felt that his child was fighting for life. Pickering said he couldn't have done otherwise. And after all, he was right that he fought for his son's life to the end. Subsequently, he almost completely died of the disease. George broke the law, but he did it to save his son. His act can be considered illegal, reckless, desperate, but who can blame the father for fighting for the life of his child? Parental love is a powerful force that cannot be underestimated. It was thanks to her that Georgie's son remained alive. The same words were uttered by Pickering Jr. himself. If my father had not done this, I would not be alive. It's all because of love, only out of love for me.